The microphone hit the concrete floor at 9:41 in the morning, and the sound it made was almost musical, a bright metallic cry, like a bell being murdered. It was a Telefunken ELA M251, one of maybe 100 left in working condition on the entire planet, worth $45,000, and Officer Kyle Brantley had thrown it the way a man throws a beer can at a trash barrel he doesn't care about hitting. Odessa Wynne stood 6 feet away, with her hands open at her sides, and said for the third time, in a voice as level as a spirit balance, "Do not touch that packet." Brantley picked up the sealed grey packet anyway, the one wrapped in red tape with black lettering, and he smiled when he did it. He had no idea that in less than 1 hour, that smile would be the single most expensive mistake of his life, and that 2 of the most famous voices in American music were already parked outside with cameras rolling. But to understand how we got here, you have to go back 3 hours to a quiet street in Berry Hill, just south of downtown Nashville, where the morning smelled like rain on warm asphalt, and somebody 2 doors down was frying bacon with the window open. Odessa Wynne, 58 years old, Des to everyone who loved her, unlocked the door of blue tape sound at 6:15, the way she had every morning for 11 years. The studio didn't look like much from the street. That was on purpose. A low brick building, painted the color of oatmeal, with a steel door, and no sign except a small blue square of tape stuck above the buzzer. Inside, it was a different world. The live room had Douglas fir floors, salvaged from a demolished church in Memphis, and when you walked across them in the quiet, they answered you back with a soft wooden tone, like the building was clearing its throat. The control room held the heart of the whole operation, a 1972 Neve 828 recording console, 72 channels of hand-wired British steel, the same model that recorded albums people had tattooed on their arms. Des had spent 6 years restoring it herself, one transformer at a time, and the last appraisal, the one her insurance company made her get, put its value at $1.2 million. She kept that piece of paper in a drawer and never mentioned it to anyone. You could tell what a thing was worth to Des by how gently she touched it, not by what she said. She made coffee in a dented percolator that had belonged to her father, a man who came home from Vietnam with a Purple Heart and a habit of humming Sam Cooke while he shaved. The percolator gurgled. The studio smelled the way it always did, machine oil and cold solder, and the faint vanilla of old magnetic tape. On the wall by her desk hung 2 framed things she rarely explained. One was a shadow box holding a gold Navy trident and a folded flag, which belonged to her husband, Marcus, retired after 26 years, most of which he still could not talk about. The other frame was turned to face the wall. It had been turned that way for 4 years, ever since she retired, because Des believed that when you finish a chapter, you close the book. But if you had turned it around, you would have seen a photograph of a younger Odessa Wynne in a dark suit, standing in front of a blue seal, shaking hands with the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. On the console's meter bridge, dead center, where she could see it from anywhere in the room, sat a grey, padded packet the size of a hardcover book. It was sealed with red evidence tape. Printed on the tape, over and over in black capitals, were the words, "Federal evidence, do not break seal." And below that, handwritten on a chain of custody label, a case number and tomorrow's court date. Because Odessa Wynne had 2 careers, and only one of them had a sign made of blue tape. 3 or 4 times a year, the United States government still called her, because there were exactly a handful of people in the country the courts trusted to pull a human voice out of a ruined recording, and she was one of them, and everybody at the Bureau knew it. Today, though, today was supposed to be about music. At 10 o'clock, Darius Coles was coming in 11 Grammys. A voice like warm smoke. I was cutting the final vocal for a gospel record with Mother Ruthie Vall, 81 years old, 4 Grammys of her own. A woman who had sung at 2 presidential inaugurations and still called Des Baby Girl. Their documentary crew filmed everything these days, every session, every cup of coffee, live streaming pieces of it to 4 million followers. Because the label wanted the world to watch the album being born. Des had just threaded a fresh reel of 2-inch tape when somebody hammered on the steel door hard enough to rattle the frame. 3 officers. The one in front was Sergeant Dale Rucker, 50s, jaw like a cinder block. Pushed up on his head, even though the sky was grey. Behind him came Officer Kyle Brantley, early 30s, chewing gum with his mouth open, thumbs hooked in his vest, rocking on his heels like a man waiting for a fight to start, so he could say it wasn't his fault. And at the back, half a step behind everyone, a young officer named Tommy Reyes, who kept looking at the building, then at his sergeant, then at his own boots. "We got a report," Rucker said, drawing the words out slow like taffy. "Stolen electronics being moved through this address. High-end equipment. You want to tell me what all this is, sweetheart?" "This is a recording studio," Des said. "It has been for 11 years. I'm the owner. Would you like to see the business license? It's framed. Right inside the door." Brantley laughed through his nose. "A recording studio," he said. "In this building?" "Sure. And I'm the Pope." Rucker stepped past her without being invited. His boots hit the church floor fur, and the room answered with that soft wooden tone, and something flickered across his face for half a second, some old reflex, before he buried it. "Anybody else here?" he asked. "My assistant engineer comes in at 9:30, Des said. "Officers, if you have a report number, I'm happy to cooperate. But I want to be clear about one thing before anyone goes further into this room." Her voice did not rise. It got quieter, and somehow that made it bigger. "There is a sealed packet on that console. Grey. Red tape. It is not mine, it is not the studio's, and it is not something any of us are permitted to open or handle. Please do not touch that packet." Brantley's eyes went straight to it, the way a child's eyes go straight to the one drawer you tell them is off limits. Lady Rucker said, "In my experience, when somebody starts a conversation telling police what they can't touch, that's usually exactly where we need to look." He picked up a pair of her headphones, vintage, irreplaceable, and dropped them back on the desk from 6 inches up, just to watch her face. Her face gave him nothing. For the next 40 minutes, it got worse in stages, the way a storm gets worse. So gradually you don't notice the exact moment it becomes dangerous. They wanted receipts. She produced receipts, a binder of them, organized by year. Brantley flipped through it with one finger, like it smelled bad. "Anybody can print paper," he said. He wandered the live room, picking things up. He put his hands on a 1958 Gibson that belonged to Mother Vall, strummed it once, badly, and set it down leaning against an amp instead of on its stand. And Des crossed the room and put it right without a word. He found the tape library, floor-to-ceiling shelves of master reels, some of them the only existing copies of sessions by men and women, now in the ground. And he said, "What is all this?" And she said, "History." And he said, "Looks like a fire hazard," and pulled one off the shelf so carelessly, the reel spooled loose across the floor in a long brown ribbon. 40 years of somebody's voice, unwinding across the concrete. That was when her assistant, a 23-year-old engineer named Priya, arrived, took one look through the door, stayed on the sidewalk, and quietly lifted her phone. She started streaming to the studio's own account, which, because of the Coles sessions, had 600,000 followers. Within 4 minutes, the stream had 9,000 viewers. Within 10, 40,000. Reyes saw the phone. "Sarge," he said, low. "Sarge, there's people filming. Maybe we should get a supervisor out here. Maybe we got the wrong address. The report said a storage unit on Craighead. This is..." "Reyes," Rucker said, without turning around. "Did I ask?" "No, sir." "Then hold the door," Des said. Second time, calm as a courtroom. "Officers, that grey packet on the console, do not touch it. I am telling you it is sealed federal material. If you don't believe me, call the number printed on the label, and someone will explain it to you in 15 seconds. Federal material," Brantley repeated, grinning at Rucker. "She's got federal material in the world's fanciest pawn shop." He turned to her, and he said the thing the internet would replay 11 million times before midnight. "Sweetheart, let me explain something. Women like you don't have million-dollar equipment. Women like you have stolen equipment. The only question I'm working on is who you stole it from." The room went very still. Priya's stream, out on the sidewalk, crossed 70,000 viewers, and the comments were scrolling too fast to read. Des looked at Brantley for a long moment. People who knew her would have recognized that look. It was the look she wore on witness stands, the look of a woman writing things down in a ledger only she could see. All she said was, "I need your name and badge number, officer." "You need to sit down and stop obstructing," Brantley said, and put his hand flat on her shoulder and pushed her, not hard enough to be a highlight clip. Hard enough that a 58-year-old woman stumbled 2 steps and caught herself on the doorframe of her own control room. And then it happened. The thing that would lead every newscast in Tennessee by 6 o'clock. Rucker decided the console was the score. A 72-channel board, obviously worth a fortune, obviously about to make his whole month. "Serial numbers," he announced. Boards like this got serial numbers. And if the number's been filed, that's a felony right there. He grabbed the edge of channel strip housing and pulled. Hand-wired looms, 50 years old, tore loose with a sound like a zipper made of copper. He yanked a fader module clean out and dropped it. Then another. Brantley joined in, because Brantley always joined in, and he was rougher. He was enjoying it now, prying at the meter bridge with his baton. And that was when the Telefunken, knocked from its mount, went into the concrete with that bright, dying bell sound, and $45,000 of 1959 Vienna engineering became scrap. Here is the strange part. The part nobody watching the stream could have known. For 1 second, 1 single second, in the middle of all of it, Sergeant Dale Rucker stopped. His hand was resting on the console's wooden armrest, worn smooth and honey-colored by 50 years of other hands. And something crossed his face like a cloud crossing a field. Dale Rucker had played trumpet as a boy. Second chair, All County, 1981. His father pawned the horn, bad February, and it never came back. And there were nights, even now, he could feel the valves under his fingers. For that 1 second, standing in a temple built by somebody who never had to pawn anything she loved, he looked almost sick. Then Brantley laughed at something, and the second passed, and Rucker did what small men do when they feel something true. He got angrier. He put his baton through the master section, glass VU meters bursting like little frozen ponds, and he said, "Tag it all, we're impounding every piece of it." That's when Brantley reached for the grey packet. "Do not touch that packet," Des said. And this third time, it was not a request. It was a voice from another life. A voice that had commanded rooms full of armed agents, and even Rucker's head snapped around. Brantley froze for half a heartbeat. "Sarge," Reyes said from the door. And there was something close to pleading in it now, Sarge. "The tape says federal evidence. I can read it from here, Sarge, please." Brantley looked at the packet. He looked at Des. And because he was the kind of man he was, because backing down in front of a woman like her was the one thing his whole crooked spine could not survive, he hooked a thumbnail under the red seal and tore it open. He shook the contents out onto the broken glass, a hard drive in a black federal caddy and a signed chain of custody form. And when the drive clattered against a shard of VU meter, he kicked it, casually, across the floor into the wall. "There," he said. "Now it's evidence in my case." Odessa Wynne exhaled slowly through her nose. And then she did the thing that made the freeze frame, the image that would become the thumbnail on 100 videos. She smiled. Not a big smile. A small, patient, terrible smile. The smile of a chess player watching an opponent hang his queen and not know it yet. "You should sit down, officer," she said gently. "Both of you. What happens next is going to happen very fast." Outside, a black Suburban was pulling to the curb behind Priya, followed by a tour van with tinted windows. And somewhere in downtown Nashville, on the 11th floor of a federal building, an automated system had just registered that the GPS-tagged evidence caddy in United States versus Harmon, a case going to trial in 19 hours, had been breached and moved, and phones were beginning to ring in rooms where phones ringing is never good news. The studio door opened, and Darius Coles walked into the wreckage of Blue Tape Sound with 2 cameramen behind him, live to 4 million followers, holding Mother Ruthie Voll's arm. For a moment, nobody said anything at all. The cameras took in everything. The gutted console, its copper wiring hanging out like something field-dressed, the murdered microphone. The tape spooled across the floor. The 2 officers standing in the middle of it, and the small woman with the straight back standing apart from them, and the broken red seal. Darius Coles is 6'3". He didn't raise his voice. He looked around the room the way a man looks at a burned-down church, and then he said, into a silence you could have recorded, "Des, baby, what did they do to your board?" Mother Voll let go of his arm. 81 years old, 4'11" in her Sunday shoes, and she walked straight past both officers like they were furniture, her cane ticking on the concrete, and she picked the broken Telefunken up off the floor and held it against her chest with both hands, the way you hold a hurt bird. "I sang Precious Lord into this microphone in 1968, she said, to no one, to everyone, to 4 million people. In Memphis, in April, the week they killed Dr. King. The comment counters were not numbers anymore. They were blurs. Rucker found his voice. "Sir, ma'am, this is an active scene. I'm going to need you to step back outside. We've had a report of stolen..." "Stolen," Darius said. He laughed once. No humor in it at all. "Man, I've recorded 9 albums in this room." He pointed at the wall of platinum plaques Brantley had walked past 3 times without reading. My name is on 6 of those. He turned to the nearer camera. You'll seeing this, he said quietly. You'll keep seeing this. And then Des's phone rang. She looked at the screen, and the small, terrible smile came back, and she answered it on speaker. Because she wanted the room to hear. Because a forensic examiner never wastes good evidence. Win, she said. The voice on the phone was clipped, male, and very unhappy. Ma'am, this is Special Agent Dorset, Evidence Control, Nashville Field Office. We're showing a seal breach and impact event on the Harmon Drive as of 9:41. Please tell me that's a sensor fault. It is not a fault, Des said, eyes on Brantley. The seal was broken by Officer Kyle Brantley of Metro PD, badge 4471, who then kicked the drive approximately 11 feet into a wall. The breach was witnessed by 6 people and recorded on 2 live streams. The drive contains the enhanced audio I certified for trial tomorrow morning. You'll want to notify the AUSA, the case agent, and probably the director's office, because the defense is going to have a very good day unless my original work product holds. There was a pause on the line. Then the agent said, Understood. Supervisor Win. Units are en route. And ma'am, he added, it's an honor. My instructor at Quantico still uses your casework. The phone clicked off, and the silence it left behind had a texture. You could have cut it into slices. Supervisor, Rucker said. His voice came out an octave wrong. Des walked, unhurried, past the ruin of her $1.2 million console and turned around the frame that had faced the wall for 4 years and hung it back the right way. The photograph, the dark suit, the blue seal, the handshake. Odessa Wynne, she said. Supervisory Special Agent, retired. 21 years, FBI Forensic Audio, 14 of them running it. That packet you opened is evidence in a federal racketeering trial that starts tomorrow at 9. I am the certifying examiner. Which means, officer, she said, turning to Brantley, and every camera turned with her, you didn't just destroy a black woman's studio this morning. You tampered with United States government evidence, on video, in front of the person the government pays to explain evidence tampering to juries. Brantley's gum had stopped. His whole face had stopped. He looked like a screen that has frozen and is waiting to be restarted. Rucker had gone the color of wet paper, and his hand kept moving towards his radio and stopping, moving and stopping, like the radio might bite him. And then the door opened one more time. The man who came in was in his early 60s, grey at the temples, wearing a plain canvas jacket. And he came in quietly, the way weather comes in under a door. He looked at the room for a long moment. He looked at his wife. Marcus Wynne had spent 26 years in places that do not appear on maps, and he had exactly one question, and he asked it in a voice like gravel settling. Des, did anyone put hands on you? The room got colder. It genuinely, physically, felt colder. He pushed me, Des said. That one. She didn't point. She didn't need to. Marcus looked at Brantley. That's all. He looked at him, the way you look at a math problem you have already solved. Then he took out his phone, took one photograph of the officer's face, and put the phone away, and said softly, to nobody in particular, okay. And somehow that quiet okay was the most frightening thing anyone had said all morning. Then he crossed the room, stepped over the wreckage without looking at it, and stood next to his wife, and took her hand. And that was all he did. And it was enough. Reyes at the door, let out a breath he'd been holding for an hour, and said to his sergeant, in front of everyone, "I told you, Sarge. I asked you to call it in, and you told me to hold the door." And then Officer Tommy Reyes did the only genuinely brave thing anyone in a uniform did that day. He took out his body cam, verified out loud that it had been running since arrival, and said, "This footage is intact and I will not be misplacing it." What happened over the next 6 weeks, the internet has mostly memorized, but it's worth saying in order, because justice, when it finally moves like a freight train, one heavy car at a time. The first car arrived within the hour. 3 actual federal agents in actual windbreakers who photographed everything, took custody of the drive, and interviewed Brantley on the sidewalk, while 40 news cameras filmed through the gap in the fence. By then, the 2 streams had been clipped, stitched, and reposted so many times that the phrase "don't touch that packet" was trending nationally above the weather and a celebrity divorce. The second car was the chief of police, who arrived at 4 in the afternoon in dress uniform, because his phone had spent the day ringing with voices from very tall buildings. The cameras caught him standing in the gutted control room, hat literally in his hands, saying, "Mrs. Wynne, on behalf of this department, there is no excuse. There will be no excuse offered, and everyone responsible will answer for it." Des listened politely. Then she said the sentence that got quoted in 300 op-eds. "Chief, I don't want your apology. I want your paperwork. Apologies are air. Paperwork is accountability." The third car was for Kyle Brantley, and it was the heaviest. Fired within 72 hours. Then indicted federally on 2 counts, tampering with evidence and deprivation of rights under color of law. And when his attorney argued his client couldn't have known the packet was federal evidence, the prosecutor simply played the tape. 3 warnings. 3 in ascending clarity, the last one in capital letters, with a young officer begging in the background. The jury was out for 4 hours. Kyle Brantley, who told a woman in her own $1 million studio that women like her only had stolen things, will spend 30 months in a federal facility, and he is banned from law enforcement for life. On the courthouse steps, cameras caught him yelling that he was the real victim here. Nobody ran the clip. It wasn't interesting anymore. The 4th car was for Dale Rucker, and it was slower, and in its way, harder. Suspended, then stripped of his sergeant's stripes by the review board, with Reyes's bodycam footage playing on a loop in the hearing room, especially the part where he tore the first module out of the console with his bare hands. He avoided indictment by testifying against Brantley, which his old friends called the final insult, a supervisor rolling on his own man to save a pension. He ended up losing anyway. He resigned the day before termination. Here is the detail almost nobody knows. Months later, the restoration shop rebuilding the nave received an envelope, no return address, containing $800 in worn 20s and a note, unsigned, in blocky handwriting. It said, "Put this toward the board. I know it don't fix it." Des read the note twice, standing by the loading dock in the cold. She never found out for certain who sent it, and she never tried very hard to find out. And if you asked her about it, she would change the subject. The 5th car was the money. The city, facing the most viewed police misconduct footage of the year, and a plaintiff who had spent 2 decades explaining evidence to juries for a living, did not go to trial. The settlement was $4.1 million, plus full restoration costs, plus a consent decree requiring property. Seizure retraining for the entire department, taught at the city's expense by an outside expert of the plaintiff's choosing. Des chose a retired federal colleague. The first slide of the training, to this day, is a photograph of a broken red evidence seal and Tommy Reyes. Reyes testified fully and plainly against both men, and then found out what testifying costs. The silence in the locker room. The tires that kept going mysteriously flat. He resigned that winter and took a job with the fire department 2 counties over, and before he left, he came to the rebuilt studio in civilian clothes, holding his hat like his chief had, and tried to say something, and couldn't. Des didn't hug him. She didn't absolve him either, because he had stood at that door longer than his conscience should have allowed, and both of them knew it. What she did was pour him a cup of coffee from her father's dented percolator, and let him sit in the control room for an hour while she worked, and when he left, she said, "You did the right thing late, Tommy. Late still counts. Do it earlier next time." He nodded and left, and sends a Christmas card every year, and she keeps them, and that is the whole complicated truth of it. The trial the packet belonged to, by the way, went forward on schedule. The drive was damaged, but Des, being Des, had certified duplicates in a federal vault, because a forensic examiner with 21 years in never has only 1 copy of anything. Mr. Harmon was convicted. The AUSA sent flowers. 11 months later, on a warm Thursday evening in Berry Hill, the steel door of Blue Tape Sound was propped open to let the spring in, and the smell of machine oil and vanilla tape drifted out to the sidewalk, mixed now with fresh sawdust and new wire. The Neve was whole again, 72 channels, every transformer, every honey-colored inch of the armrest, and the restoration shop had found, of all impossible things, another 251, and Mother Ruthie Vall was standing in front of it in her Sunday shoes with her eyes closed. Darius Coles sat on a stool beside her with a lyric sheet he wasn't going to look at. Priya rode the faders. Marcus Wynne sat in the back of the control room in the dark, the way he liked, arms crossed, almost smiling. On the wall, the photograph with the blue seal hung facing the room now, and next to it, in a small plain frame, a strip of torn red evidence tape, because Des had decided some chapters you don't close, you hang them where you can see them. She leaned into the talkback mic. "Whenever you're ready, Mother." "Baby girl," the old woman said, "I've been ready since 1968. Des reached out and pressed record. The red light came on above the glass. The tape began to turn with its soft, breathing hiss. The VU needles lifted like 2 heads waking up. And into the microphone came the first note, low and warm and unbroken, filling the room built of church floors, and out through the open door, into the street, where anyone passing could stop on the sidewalk and hear it for free. If you had been standing outside Blue Tape Sound that morning, watching them tear that room apart, what would you have done? Kept filming, or stepped through that door? Tell us in the comments, because stories like this only get told when people refuse to look away. And if you believe dignity is worth more than a badge misused, subscribe, because tomorrow we have another story, and someone else who picked the wrong person to underestimate.